What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. And today we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive for your Dynasty fantasy football teams. What I want to talk about is 15 potential players that you can be stashing on the end of your bench, especially if you are in a deep league, because all of these players we're going to be talking about today are currently ranked outside of the top 250 players on Keep Trade Cut. So you got to go a long way to find these guys. Keep in mind, there's going to be red flags with every single one of these guys. They are dart throws. That is the point of a stash. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about this first guy. So the first player that I want to talk about is actually going to be a couple of players, but more specifically, I want to focus on the Ravens backfield. I think currently right now, we talked about it on Let's Talk Dynasty, there is a wide open job here as Derrick Henry's backup to start the season. Keaton Mitchell, he has recently been placed on the PUP. Now, Rasheen Ali, he was a draft pick by the Baltimore Ravens out of Marshall. He is going to be competing with Justice Hill. I think you could get either of these guys and put them on your bench just to see what happens. I don't expect Keaton Mitchell to be ready week one. And if that is the case, if I'm going to be making one of these swings, I am going to swing for the fences. And I think Rasheen Ali is the guy that I would rather have out of the two. But like I mentioned, if you want to grab one or both of these guys, throw them on the end of your bench, go for it. I don't mind you getting Justice Hill, but Justice Hill's been around for a while. We just kind of know what he is up to this point. Now, the second player that I want to talk about is going to be Xavier Gipson from the New York Jets. And there was a report earlier this offseason where Xavier Gipson might have been working in 3 wide receiver sets next to Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams. And as you guys know, I'm a big fan of Malachi Corley, but Malachi Corley, he still isn't a guarantee for the most part at the NFL level. You got to see him go do it first. So if you want to stash Xavier Gipson, I'm more than open to you guys going to do that. The reality is Mike Williams, he's been placed on the PUP. There is no guarantee that he is going to be ready week one either. If that is the case, there's going to be more opportunity in training camp for Xavier Gipson to get some touches, and that'll hopefully help him develop a role that's more than just a punt and a kick returner, which he kind of served as last year for the Jets. Now, another guy you should be stashing is going to be Zay Jones now for the Arizona Cardinals. And Zay Jones, he signed that 1-year deal here with Arizona this offseason. And I've talked at length about how much I like the Arizona Cardinals this year, how much I like Kyler Murray. We even talked a little bit about Greg Dortch on a recent video. But the reality is he's going to have the opportunity to compete for the opposite side of the field, opposite of Marvin Harrison Jr. I expect Michael Wilson to definitely get a crack at that as well. And I probably prefer him to be the guy in that set. But there really has not been a lot that's been established behind Marvin Harrison Jr., I guess, now at this point. So Zay Jones in an offense that I think is improving this year, he's definitely worth the dart throw, and he could have some wide receiver 4 upside in your PPR leagues if he does find himself into the snaps and into the targets. Now, our next player we'll talk about is going to be DJ Chark for the Los Angeles Chargers. And DJ Chark, he's coming off of a pretty bad year in 2023. Now, the majority of that really wasn't his fault. He played for the bottom dweller Carolina Panthers. They just didn't do a lot on offense. And so DJ Chark, he was kind of banged up and he didn't do a lot as well. Now, you got to think that Jim Harbaugh, one of the first offseason signings that he made on the offensive side of the football was actually DJ Chark. And there was a recent report too, which QJ truthers, cover your ears, you're not going to want to hear this. DJ Chark, he's been operating as the X wide receiver in 3 wide receiver sets alongside Joshua Palmer and Lad McConkey. So if you want to pick up DJ Chark, hold him on your bench. This is a player who could find himself into some meaningful reps for the Los Angeles Chargers, who are going to have to throw the football as much as they want to establish the run this year, and on a team that lacks a lot of established pass catching options. Now, the next guy we'll talk about is going to be Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. And the Dallas Cowboys, they threw more touchdowns than anybody in football last year during the 2023 season, and they're expected to be a pass-heavy offense again here in 2024. And with Michael Gallup leaving earlier in the offseason, taking his talents to Las Vegas, where he's going to play with the Las Vegas Raiders, it really does open the door for the wide receiver 3 job here in Dallas between Jalen Tolbert and probably rookie wide receiver Ryan Flournoy. Now, according to some offseason reports, Jalen Tolbert, he's supposedly been attached to Dak Prescott's hip over the course of the offseason, maybe getting some extra work with his starting quarterback. And when reporters asked head coach Mike McCarthy about Jalen Tolbert, he said that he thinks Tolbert has taken leaps and bounds this offseason to improve in his confidence and his understanding of the NFL game. So I think if you want to take the bet on rookie wide receiver Ryan Flournoy, or if you want to take the bet on Jalen Tolbert, you can make that decision. The reality is you're just trying to land the guy who gets the starting wide receiver 3 role here in Dallas. But if I had to pick between one of the two, I'm going to take my dart throw on Jalen Tolbert. Now, going back to a little bit of a committee approach, I think we should be looking at the wide receivers here in San Francisco. More specifically, we should look at Jacob Cowing and Jauan Jennings. Now, I will admit, throwing both of these guys on this list is a little bit more speculative, and mainly that's because you guys know about the trade rumors that Brandon Ayuk has had. He actually officially requested a trade, so if there was a trade of Brandon Ayuk, that could potentially open up some more wide receiver opportunities for one of these guys in this room. Now, you also have to take into account that the 49ers, they placed rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall on the reserve non-football injury list earlier this week. It's not supposed to be serious, but it should open up some potential opportunities here in training camp. But like I said, quite a few dominoes are going to have to fall into place for one of these guys to be relevant. So if you don't want to take the shot, I don't blame you. But if you do add one of these guys onto the end of your bench and Brandon Ayuk does get traded, you may find yourself holding somebody on one of the best offenses in football who definitely found himself into some more targets. Now, moving on to our next player, I am going to talk about Alexander Mattison, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. And Alexander Mattison, he's been one of my favorite picks in the late rounds, pretty much the last pick of these underdog drafts. And the majority of the reason behind that is because there's really no depth here behind Zamir White in Las Vegas. Now, Dylan Luabe, he was added in the NFL draft, but the reality is he comes from a small school and he doesn't really have the draft capital that makes you super worried. So I do expect Alexander Mattison to be the main backup to Zamir White this year. And even between the two guys, Zamir and Alexander Mattison, Mattison actually profiles as the better pass catching back. So there is a chance that he gets used on third downs and potentially in games when they are trailing, which we do expect the Las Vegas Raiders to most likely be trailing in quite a few games this season. And that's not even to mention that if there were an injury to a guy like Zamir White, there could be a massive opportunity share in store for a guy like Alexander Mattison. And at that point, they might choose to address the running back room even further. But I think right now, Alexander Mattison is definitely a must stash in this offense. Now, I'm going to go back to another committee kind of approach. Let's look at this Indianapolis Colts running back room. And more specifically, we're trying to find the handcuff for Jonathan Taylor. I'm looking at Evan Hull and Trey Sermon. Now, obviously, we all know that the Colts, they let their backup running back in Zach Moss. He went out, he tested free agency, and now he signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. And after letting him do that, they didn't really address the running back room here any further. So now it sits as Trey Sermon and Evan Hull, and both of these guys are going to be competing for Jonathan Taylor's handcuff. Now, from some of the early reports that we've gotten out of mini camps and things like that, it does seem like Trey Sermon might have a lead on this backup job over Evan Hull. So he would be the guy that I target between the two. But if he's on somebody's bench already, or if Evan Hull is just your guy, I'm not opposed to you going to get Evan Hull either. Now, Trey Sermon, he's a former third-round pick, and he hasn't gotten a ton of NFL work yet, but whether he or Hull wins this backup, there is going to be a lot of opportunities for them if there ever were a Jonathan Taylor injury, and because of that, you should be stashing them on the end of your bench. Now, moving on to our next guy, we are going to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and you might be starting to notice a little bit of a theme here. The Kansas City Chiefs depth chart behind Isaiah Pacheco currently has a bunch of unproven assets, and although you might be able to say that CEH is still pretty much unproven up to this point in his career, he definitely is worth an add on the end of your bench. Now, just like Alexander Mattison, he is another guy that I'm taking a ton of late round dart throws on in these best ball drafts. I think I have about 15 to 20% exposure of CEH right now, and that might sound disgusting, probably is, but you've seen the memes of Isaiah Pacheco and how he runs so hard. He's trying to stomp through the field, and he just runs like an angry man, and that's good, and that's fun, that's great. But if he goes down, if he gets injured, like it or not, CEH is most likely going to be the first guy to step onto the football field, and you also have to account for the fact that Jerick McKinnon is no longer there, so there is an opportunity for CEH to take some of the passing down work that McKinnon had before. Now, we're going to go to one more committee. We're going to talk about the Steelers wide receiver room, and this will be the last committee for the day, but let's look at Calvin Austin III and Van Jefferson. Now, on this week's episode of Let's Talk Dynasty, I actually mentioned the Steelers wide receiver room as something that I'm watching going into NFL training camp, because behind George Pickens, there really is nobody that's been established. Now, we all expect Roman Wilson to end up being the long-term wide receiver 2 here, but the reality is they're going to run some 3 wide receiver sets, and there's going to have to be guys to step on the field when they do that. Now, if you're playing in those deep leagues like I do, you're looking for guys that can just find any type of playing time, especially when you're trying to pick people up off the waiver wire. I think because of that, Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin are worth the stash. Now, what I've heard out of camp so far is that really it's probably a very fair battle between both of these guys. No guy really has the edge. I've heard good things about Van Jefferson and good things about Calvin Austin. But if I had to make a choice between both of these guys and they were both on my waiver wire, I probably would be picking up Van Jefferson. I think he just profiles as the better deep threat. He can play on the outside if Roman Wilson does take that slot role. And I think he's just a little bit more talented than Calvin Austin, but I don't think Calvin Austin is a bad add either. Now, the good thing about adding these guys is you can add them if nothing happens in training camp. You can drop them as we get closer to the preseason, and we can add some more guys as those guys start to break out as well. And now the last and final player that I want to talk about today is going to be a free agent. We'll talk about Hunter Renfrow, formerly of the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders, they cut Hunter Renfrow back in March of this year, but it wasn't really because of play. It's because he had almost a $14 million cap hit going into the 2024 season. But Renfrow posted 270 catches over 5 years with the Raiders, and he's proven that he can be a capable slot wide receiver here at the NFL level. Now, he's somebody who, if he's on my waiver, I'm willing to pick him up and stash, because the reality is, as training camp happens, as the preseason happens, there's going to be injuries, or there's just going to be teams that are filling out their depth charts, and Hunter Renfrow is going to be probably one of the first guys that gets a phone call, especially from these wide receiver needy teams. And I've already started to hear a couple rumblings about where Hunter Renfrow could maybe go. In fact, you guys know I'm a Vikings fan. I've heard some rumors about him potentially being the wide receiver 3 in Minnesota. So with what he's shown us and with some of the rumors, I think he's somebody that we should just stash on the back of our bench and see what happens. And if nothing happens by preseason, we can cut him and move on and go to the next guy. And so I couldn't give you guys this video today unless I showed you guys some guys that I'd be willing to drop for anybody that we talked about in this video already. So here on the screen, you guys can see it. I created a list. All of these guys are going within that 250 to 350 range on Keep Trade Cut. They're all going to be about the same value as the guys we talked about today. If you have any of these quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, or tight ends, I'm definitely willing to cut them. If that was too quick, you can pause the screen, look at it, take some notes, see who you have on your roster, and make those moves for yourself today in your Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues. Now, with that being said, that is all I have for you today in this video. So if you did enjoy it, if you found some actionable advice, if there's somebody that you're going to go pick up, hit that like button. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell. That way you never miss any of our future uploads. And last but not least, make sure you guys go join our Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description. I'm helping you guys with your dynasty teams, redraft teams, best ball teams, anything you need. I got you. And as I mentioned, it's free to join, so there is no risk in doing that. Also, follow us on Apple and Spotify. You guys can do that. They're linked in the description down below. And with all of that being said, I will see you guys on our next video. But until then, peace out.